The storm that had been brewing between my mother and me finally reached its breaking point on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life, my graduation day. For months, our household had become a battleground over my choice in a partner, with her vehemently opposing Lucas, the man I loved deeply but who didn't meet her rigid standards for suitable men. Her disapproval wasn't just rooted in superficial criteria. It was layered with an unyielding fear that I would repeat her own mistakes, a prophecy she refused to let come true. But little did either of us know this clash was merely the calm before the hurricane. As we stood together under the sweltering sun at the university lawn, surrounded by cheering families and proud parents, everything fell apart. My mother's sharp eyes caught sight of something, or rather someone, that shattered her composure entirely. Lucas standing hand in hand with me during the ceremony, smiling warmly as if daring her to object. It wasn't until later that evening, back home amidst the chaos of congratulatory calls and half-eaten cake, when things took a darker turn. In a fit of rage, she confronted me about not only my relationship with Lucas, but also another secret I'd kept buried deep within myself, a forbidden affair with someone else entirely. The air grew heavy as accusations flew like daggers, each word sharper than the last. And then came the bombshell neither of us could have anticipated. In her fury, my mother revealed a long-buried family skeleton, the truth about my father's infidelity years ago, which had poisoned their marriage beyond repair. This revelation felt like a dagger twisting into my heart, unraveling everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust. The chaos in my personal life was nothing compared to the professional maelstrom that awaited me at work. Just as I thought things couldn't get worse after my graduation day fiasco, I found myself teetering on the edge of a career-ending catastrophe. The project I had poured months of blood, sweat, and tears into a groundbreaking initiative meant to revolutionize our company's product line was crumbling before my eyes. Deadlines were missed, budgets ballooned out of control, and key stakeholders began questioning not just the viability of the project, but also my competence as its lead manager. My boss called me into his office one grim afternoon, his face an unreadable mask of disappointment. "If this fails," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "it's not just the project going down, it's you." His words hit me like a wrecking ball, leaving me reeling with panic and self-doubt. But little did I know, this was only the beginning of my descent into a corporate nightmare. Amidst the mounting pressure, I leaned heavily on Emma, my closest colleague and confidant. We had worked side by side for years, sharing late-night coffee runs and brainstorming sessions that felt more like therapy than work. She was the one person I trusted implicitly during these dark days, or so I thought. One evening, while working late in the office, I stumbled upon something that shattered that trust completely, a folder filled with confidential documents, detailing our company's trade secrets, along with email exchanges between Emma and someone outside the organization. At first, denial clouded my mind. Surely, there must be some explanation, some misunderstanding. But as I scrolled through the damning evidence, reality crashed over me like icy water. Emma wasn't just careless. She was a corporate spy selling our hard-earned innovations to a rival firm. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade ever could. How could the woman who consoled me when I cried over Lucas, who reassured me during my mother's tirades, betray me and the entire company in such a calculated manner? Every memory we shared now seemed tainted, every laugh hollow. And yet, as anger boiled within me, fear crept in too. If anyone discovered what I knew, I'd become collateral damage in this scandal. Worse still, the failure of the project, the very thing threatening my job, could now be traced back to Emma's sabotage. Her actions weren't just malicious. They were meticulously planned to ensure my downfall alongside hers if caught. The weight of it all pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. With no allies left to turn to and time running out, I realized I was trapped in a web of deceit where every move carried unimaginable risks. As if the betrayals at work weren't enough to shatter my world further, another revelation threatened to tear apart what little stability I had left in my personal life. It started with a cryptic phone call late one night, Emma's voice trembling on the other end of the line as she whispered, "You need to meet me. Now." Her tone was urgent, almost desperate, and despite everything, I couldn't ignore it. When I arrived at the dimly lit cafe where she insisted we talk, her face was pale, her hands shaking as she clutched a crumpled envelope. For a moment, I thought she might confess about being the corporate spy or beg for forgiveness. Instead, she revealed something far darker. Lucas, the man I loved more than anything, was drowning in gambling debts so massive they could sink us both. "He owes dangerous people," Emma stammered, her eyes darting around like prey expecting predators to pounce. "And he's been lying to you this whole time." The words felt like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of me. All those times Lucas canceled plans last minute, all those secretive phone calls, it suddenly made sense. But before I could process the magnitude of his deception, Emma dropped another bombshell. There was someone pulling strings behind the scenes, orchestrating misery not just for me, but for everyone I cared about. She hesitated, then admitted that she herself wasn't entirely innocent. "It's Daniel," she said, naming an old acquaintance from college who I hadn't seen in years. "He blames you for everything. For ruining his career when we were younger, for turning your back on him when he needed help most." Daniel? The name sent chills down my spine. Memories flooded back of a bitter rivalry during our university days. How he'd spiraled into self-destruction after failing to secure a prestigious internship I'd earned instead. Back then, I dismissed his resentment as harmless jealousy, never imagining it would fester into something so toxic. According to Emma, Daniel had spent years plotting revenge, quietly infiltrating my life by manipulating those closest to me. He'd fed Lucas false promises of financial salvation through risky investments while secretly funneling money away. Worse still, he'd exploited cracks in my already fragile relationship with my mother, planting seeds of doubt about my choices and worsening the rift between us. Every misfortune, every betrayal, it seemed Daniel's shadow loomed over them all. The realization left me reeling. Not only was the love of my life compromised by greed and desperation, but my entire existence appeared to be under siege by a vengeful ghost from my past. How could I fight against someone who knew exactly where to strike, who operated unseen, poisoning every corner of my life? As Emma pleaded for forgiveness, promising to help undo some of the damage she'd inadvertently caused, I realized the stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about saving myself anymore. It was about dismantling the web of destruction Daniel had woven around me and finding a way to reclaim whatever fragments of happiness remained. The chaos of my life seemed to mirror the world around me, as if fate itself had conspired to amplify every misfortune. On what should have been a joyous occasion, the graduation ceremony that marked years of hard work and sacrifice, a catastrophe unfolded that left an indelible scar on everyone present. As we gathered under the sprawling tent set up on campus, laughter filling the air alongside proud applause. No one could have predicted the disaster about to strike. Without warning, a violent gust of wind tore through the area, ripping apart the makeshift structure like paper. Screams erupted as metal poles collapsed inward, injuring dozens of attendees in mere seconds. I watched in horror as Lucas rushed toward me, shielding me from falling debris with his body just moments before everything crumbled around us. The scene was apocalyptic: students, parents, professors, all scrambling for safety amidst shattered glass and twisted metal. When the dust settled, ambulances wailed in the distance, their flashing lights casting eerie shadows over the devastation. Among the injured was my mother, who had been standing near the stage when the collapse occurred. Her condition remained uncertain, adding another layer of anguish to an already unbearable day. And yet, this was only the beginning of the unraveling. Months later, during what was supposed to be a fresh start at a New Year's Eve party, meant to lift our spirits after such a harrowing year, another unforeseen calamity struck. Just as guests began arriving at Emma's house decorated beautifully with twinkling fairy lights and tables laden with food, the entire city plunged into darkness. A massive power outage swept across the region, leaving millions without electricity on one of the coldest nights of the year. The festive atmosphere evaporated instantly, replaced by confusion and mounting frustration. Phones died, heaters stopped working, and panic spread as rumors circulated about potential rolling blackouts lasting days. For me, it felt symbolic, a cruel metaphor how my once bright future had dimmed beyond recognition. What was supposed to be a celebration of resilience turned into yet another reminder of how fragile happiness truly is. The echoes of my past came crashing back with a vengeance when I least expected it, pulling me into a vortex of emotions I thought I had buried long ago. It happened during one of the darkest nights of my life. A storm so fierce it seemed heaven itself was tearing apart. After the power outage on New Year's Eve left us stranded in freezing darkness, Lucas insisted we check on Emma, who lived alone and might need help. The roads were treacherous, slick with ice and rain, but our determination outweighed caution. As we drove through the howling wind, memories I hadn't dared to confront resurfaced like ghosts rising from the depths. I was 8 years old again, standing at the edge of that murky lake where I nearly drowned. My father had promised to teach me how to swim, his laughter warm and reassuring as he held my hand. But then panic struck, a sudden slip, the icy water swallowing me whole, and the suffocating silence beneath the surface. That day ended with my mother dragging me out of the water while my father stood frozen, paralyzed by fear or indecision, or perhaps something worse. As the car skidded dangerously close to a ditch, I gripped the dashboard tightly, trying to steady both my breathing and my racing heart. "Are you okay?" Lucas asked, his voice cutting through the storm outside and the tempest within me. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was true. The memory felt too vivid, too raw, as though the universe was forcing me to relive every painful moment. And then, just as we reached Emma Street, the unthinkable happened. A tree uprooted by the gale crashed onto the road ahead, blocking our path. We had no choice but to abandon the car and continue on foot. The rain lashed against us like whips, each step an agonizing battle against nature's fury. Halfway there, I slipped on the soaked pavement, landing hard on my side. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, the weight of the fall pressing down on me, mirroring the crushing sensation of being trapped underwater all those years ago. Lucas pulled me up, his arms strong yet gentle, but the terror lingered. It wasn't just the physical danger. It was the overwhelming realization that some fears never truly leave you. They only wait for the right moment to strike. When we finally stumbled into Emma's house, drenched and shivering, she greeted us with wide eyes, her expression a mix of relief and alarm. Over cups of lukewarm tea brewed over a makeshift fire, she began sharing fragments of her own childhood stories about growing up with my father, whom she described as kind but distant. At first, I listened politely, grateful for the distraction. But then she dropped a bombshell that shattered any remaining illusions I had about him. He wasn't always faithful, she admitted hesitantly, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames. Even before your parents' marriage fell apart, he had affairs. Multiple ones. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer, cracking open old wounds I'd tried so desperately to heal. Suddenly, everything made sense, the late-night phone calls, the unexplained absences, the hollow look in my mother's eyes whenever she spoke of him. All this time, I clung to the image of my father as a flawed but loving man, someone worthy of forgiveness. Now, even that fragile hope dissolved into dust. The nostalgia I once cherished, that idyllic summer spent fishing with him, the bedtime stories whispered under starlit skies, felt tainted, poisoned by the truth. How could I reconcile the man I adored with the selfish, deceitful figure Emma described? Tears streamed down my face as I grappled with the betrayal, not just of him, but of the entire foundation upon which my childhood rested. In that moment, I realized that some scars run deeper than flesh, carving pathways into the soul that can never fully heal. The night of reckoning arrived under a sky heavy with foreboding, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. It was New Year's Eve, and despite the earlier chaos caused by the citywide blackout, Emma had insisted we gather at her secluded cabin on the outskirts of town and attempt, she said, to salvage what little joy remained in this cursed year. But joy felt like a distant mirage, especially when I noticed Daniel lurking near the property line earlier that evening. His presence sent icy tendrils crawling up my spine. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct screaming danger. Still, I tried to shake off the unease, focusing instead on Lucas's reassuring grip on my hand as we navigated the treacherous roads leading to Emma's cabin. When we finally arrived, the air inside was thick with tension, though no one dared voice their fears aloud. Emma moved about nervously, lighting candles and stoking the fire, while Lucas busied himself checking the generator outside. As midnight approached, the atmosphere grew heavier, almost suffocating. That's when I overheard a snippet of conversation between Emma and someone on the phone, a hushed exchange filled with cryptic warnings and veiled threats. My blood ran cold as realization dawned. Daniel wasn't just here out of spite or revenge. He was planning something far more sinister. Summoning every ounce of courage, I confronted Emma after everyone else had retreated to their rooms for the night. "What are you hiding?" I demanded, my voice trembling but firm. At first, she denied everything, her eyes darting around like trapped prey. But when I pressed harder, revealing that I knew about Daniel's involvement, her facade crumbled. She confessed through choked sobs that Daniel had coerced her into setting a trap, a plan so diabolical it left me reeling. He intended to stage an accident, making it look like Lucas and I were victims of a tragic mishap during the storm. The thought of his malevolent scheme sent waves of nausea crashing over me. How could anyone be so cruel? Before I could process the full weight of her confession, a deafening crash echoed through the cabin, followed by screams from outside. Rushing toward the sound, we found Lucas lying unconscious beside the overturned car, which had skidded off the icy driveway and slammed into a tree. Panic surged through me as I knelt beside him, checking for signs of life. His pulse was weak but steady, thank God, but the sight of blood trickling down his forehead made my stomach churn. Emma frantically dialed emergency services, only to discover that the storm had knocked out all communication lines. We were utterly alone, stranded miles away from help, with Daniel still lurking somewhere in the shadows. In the midst of the chaos, another horrifying truth surfaced. Daniel hadn't planned for just a staged accident. He was prepared to finish the job himself. As we struggled to carry Lucas back inside, a figure emerged from the darkness, silhouetted against the flickering candlelight. It was Daniel, his face twisted into a mask of hatred and triumph. "You should have stayed out of my way," he snarled, brandishing a knife glinting menacingly in the dim light. Every muscle in my body tensed as I shielded Lucas, ready to fight for our survival. Time seemed to slow as adrenaline coursed through my veins, sharpening every sense. Just as Daniel lunged forward, a loud shout pierced the night. Emma had returned with a rifle she kept hidden in the cabin. Her hands shook violently, but her resolve was unwavering. "Leave them alone," she screamed, aiming directly at Daniel. For a moment, the world hung suspended, the standoff crackling with raw emotion. Then, with a guttural growl, Daniel turned and fled into the storm, disappearing into the abyss. Though the immediate threat had passed, the scars of that night would linger forever. The crash, the betrayal, the sheer terror, it all fused together into a tapestry of trauma that none of us could escape. And as dawn broke, casting pale light over the wreckage, I realized that survival came at a cost far greater than any of us could have imagined. As the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, Moscow was hit by an unprecedented blizzard that seemed to have been conjured straight out of a nightmare. The storm descended with such ferocity that it paralyzed the entire city in mere hours. Streets were buried under mountains of snow, visibility dropped to zero, and temperatures plummeted to record lows colder than anyone could remember in decades. For Vera, Valya, and their colleagues trapped at the hospital where they worked, this sudden calamity turned what should have been a joyous celebration into a harrowing test of endurance. The first sign of trouble came when the power went out. A deafening silence fell over the building as the hum of machinery ceased, plunging them into darkness. Emergency generators kicked in, but they only powered critical systems, leaving most of the facility dimly lit and eerily cold. "It's like we're living in some dystopian movie," muttered one nurse, her breath visible in the frosty air. Vera, who had been trying to stay composed for her team, felt panic rising within her. She thought about her sister Valya, pregnant and vulnerable, alone at home without heat or communication. Was she safe? Had she found shelter? Meanwhile, tensions flared among those stranded together. Victor, the architect whose ambitious plans for luxury apartments had consumed his life, now sat huddled in a corner, clutching his phone, a useless device with no signal. His frustration boiled over when he snapped at Nikolai, the painter tasked with designing dream nurseries for expectant parents. Why bother planning anything when the world itself is falling apart? Victor spat bitterly. Nikolai, usually calm and philosophical, retorted sharply, because hope is all we have left. Amid the chaos, memories of happier times surfaced unbidden. Vera recalled her childhood winters spent sledding with her father before his betrayal shattered their family. Those carefree days felt impossibly distant now, replaced by the harsh reality of survival. Valya, too, found herself haunted by visions of her unborn child, a beacon of hope amidst despair, yet also a source of terror. What kind of future awaited this baby in a world so cruel and unpredictable? Outside, the howling wind sounded almost alive, as if mocking their plight. Trees groaned under the weight of ice, snapping like twigs and crashing onto frozen streets. Cars abandoned mid-journey were quickly swallowed by snowdrifts, their occupants forced to seek refuge wherever they could. Inside the hospital, patients shivered beneath thin blankets while staff scrambled to distribute whatever supplies remained. One elderly woman clutched Vera's hand, tears streaming down her face. "Will we survive this?" she whispered hoarsely. Vera didn't trust herself to answer. Instead, she squeezed the woman's frail fingers reassuringly. Hours stretched into eternity, each minute heavier than the last. Tempers frayed further when rumors spread of another emergency, an incoming patient suffering from severe hypothermia. With limited resources and dwindling morale, the medical team braced themselves for the worst. As fate would have it, the patient turned out to be none other than Margarita Alexandrova, the woman once involved with Vera's father years ago. Her arrival reignited old wounds, forcing everyone to confront unresolved grievances. Yet, oddly enough, it also sparked moments of unexpected solidarity. Helping Margarita thaw from the brink of death reminded them of their shared humanity, transcending past betrayals and grudges. By dawn, the blizzard showed no signs of abating. Exhausted but determined, Vera gathered her colleagues for a brief meeting. "We can't control the storm," she said firmly, "but we can control how we respond to it. Let's make sure no one else gets hurt tonight." Inspired by her resolve, others nodded in agreement. Together, they devised makeshift solutions, melting snow for drinking water, rationing food, and even using body heat to keep hypothermic patients warm. Though the ordeal was far from over, a fragile sense of unity began to take root. Strangers became allies, adversaries became friends, and the line between personal struggles and collective survival blurred. For better or worse, the historic blizzard had stripped away pretenses, leaving behind raw truths and renewed purpose.